Intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the darkened hour.
Okay, hello everyone, and hello Adam.
Hey, good evening, Richard.
Okay, Adam, so today's episode somewhat follows on from a couple of episodes ago. We were talking about Ziad Jarrah, the supposed pilot of Flight 93. We questioned whether he was the pilot or not, and discussed his family connections to Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service group. Now, looking at like the 9/11 truth movement, okay, there's a lot of, like, Israel is singled out, I suppose, along with the United States, as the country held up as being most responsible for 9/11. You see a lot of like images of the six-pointed star and the Twin Towers on Facebook. A lot of it seems like there's not a lot behind it. Maybe it's overblown, but we do have some reasons to talk about this Israeli angle too, right? So what I wanted to ask you today is if you could expand on what we were talking about at the Ziad Jarrah episode and boil it down to what do we actually know about Israeli involvement in, foreknowledge of 9/11?
Well, this is a very polarizing subject in regards to basically just the truth movement. A lot of people have made the Israelis as the perpetrators of 9/11, and it's not as simple as that. They weren't the ones who hijacked the planes, and if you want to say that they knew about it, I won't disagree. I think for sure the Israeli Mossad had foreknowledge of the attacks itself. And they weren't the only ones. You also had the Saudi intelligence group, the General Intelligence Directorate out west, the Israeli Mossad here in the east, under the coverage of using moving companies, and which is an ingenious proposition because they can actually move around while the hijackers were moving from Florida to New York, per se. So they would have better coverage and better monitoring of the Hamburg cell, which was based in the east, and Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Hani Anjar out west, and the Saudis were following them. In the East Coast, there is a moving company called Urban Moving Systems, and it was managed by Dominic Suter. They have an office in New York and in New Jersey, with the bigger warehouse in Weehawken, New Jersey. It has come out through, redacted by the way, FBI field reports after 9/11, that these moving companies based in New Jersey, New York, and in Florida are connected to one another. And the story starts, of course, with a woman who is in Doric Towers. Her name is Maria. Her last name is redacted in the FBI report to protect her identity. And she said that she saw three men who were seemingly celebrating while the North Tower was burning. And that she waited until her husband got home to make a call to the police, in which the police then sent out a bolo, a beyond the lookout, for this white van with the license plate, I don't know the license plate, but license plate number was given out. And Maria actually was viewing this celebration with her binoculars. She was up on the, I think somewhere up on like the 20th floor of the towers. Towers are very tall. And that they were in the Doric parking lot, Doric Towers parking lot, which has a wide view of downtown Manhattan. You can see the towers right there. When the Bolo was on nationwide account at about, I think, 4:30, East Rutherford, New Jersey Police Department were on the Parkway when one officer, Scott DiCarlo, actually saw a white van with the license plate number, but one license plate number being off by like a number or a letter or something like that. And he decided to take action and said, I'm going to pull this truck over. And that when the truck was pulled over, him and another police officer went to the passenger and to the driver's side. And Scott DiCarlo went to the driver's side. And the driver was Sivan Kurzberg, who is an employee of Urban Moving Systems. And he says, sir, we need you to come out of the truck. And he doesn't get out. Even though Sivan Kurzberg could speak English, he doesn't follow the command of Scott DiCarlo. And Scott DiCarlo actually is nervous at this point. He doesn't know if, this is part of the 9/11 attacks. He then decides to open up the door and drag Sivan Kurzberg out. His partner on the other side manages to pull his gun and tells all the others to come out of the truck. And they do, and they all sit on the side. Meanwhile, the cars who are on the Parkway see this, and they start yelling and screaming, and more cops are coming to moderate the scene before it breaks out into chaos. So he then, as he's pulling Sivan Kurzberg out of the truck, Sivan Kurzberg then says something very peculiar, which has no relevancy to why he's being pulled out of the truck. He says, we are not your problem. The Palestinians are your problem. Your problem are our problems. Now, when you take that statement to effect, it really has no relevancy to the scene at the time. Why would Scott DiCarlo care about Palestinians in the attacks of 9/11? Nobody knows what happened. So the statement didn't make sense, but it made an impression on Scott DiCarlo enough that he remembered that exchange. So he notices that the Urban Moving Systems truck had 5 occupants in it at this time. The 5 occupants were Sivan Kurzberg, his brother Paul Kurzberg, Yaron Schmel, Oded Elner, and Mamari, Omar Mamari. Those were the 5 occupants. When they brought them back to East Rutherford headquarters, police department, Scott DiCarlo wrote a 3-page report, which is not redacted at all. You could view it on archive.org. After 2 days of being in East Rutherford, the FBI then took over the case of these 5 Israeli nationals because, according to DiCarlo, they had information in their truck which was pretty incriminating. One of the things that they found in the truck was a map, and the map had the World Trade Center, Doric Towers, George Washington Bridge, and other areas highlighted on the map. They also found a black book, a small black book, a notebook of seams, and it had numbers of other moving companies like Classic International Movers in Florida, Moishi Movers, Max Movers, White Glove Movers. These were all moving companies that had Israeli nationals working for them. In fact, on September, I think, 14th, they'll hold me to the date, I think it was just a couple of days after 9/11, the FBI made arrests with Israeli nationals at Classic International Movers, which I think had an office also in New Jersey as well. So the FBI then took over the case, and over the course of the next month, they tried to get the Kurzberg brothers and others to take lie detector tests, and they all refused. when I believe it was Paul Kurtzberg who took the lie detector test, he failed miserably, terrible. So that was enough to hold them because they weren't telling them everything until they interviewed Omar Mamari, who was the youngest of the five. And he was the last person that they picked up on the day before they were to drive. I think when they were taking the East Rutherford Turnpike, they were going back to headquarters in Weehawken. But they also found passports to other countries as well that they were supposed to, I guess, flee from. I don't want to incriminate them like that, but what else would they be? And these were tickets to South America and Europe. In fact, in one of the in a sock of Sivan Kurtzberg, they found I think it was $5,000 cash or $4,000 cash. That's a lot of money in a sock. Why wouldn't it be in his pocket? So a lot of incriminating, suspicious things that kept the Israelis themselves to be held for the next 61 days until pressure from two unnamed senators in New York with the lawyer, Dershowitz, Alan Dershowitz, acting as mediator for the release of the Israeli nationals themselves. All to the FBI, who wanted to hold them there for longer, because when you look at the FBI reports itself, which also could be found on archive.org, the report itself is heavily redacted. And one important page as to the agent who wrote the report, who is unnamed, is asked the question. He asks, what was the reason for the continued imprisonment, well, the holding of these Israeli nationals? And did they have any type of information that they were withholding, and what was the opinion of the agent himself? And the page is a page and a half long, and it's all redacted. So if these Israeli nationals didn't have anything incriminating to them, they would have been released a long time ago, and plus a simple no would have been the answer to the question regarding if they had any relevant information to the 9/11 attacks, as asked in the report.
Okay, Adam, but the other thing that occurs to me, is there ever been a reason given for why the redactions, right? Because if they're just like three young guys enjoying life in a foreign country, making some money working for a removals company, and they just happened to be in that area, they saw a plane hit a building, so they went up to a high building to take photos, and that's that, then what's the need for the redaction? Has any explanation been given ever for why these reports? Because that seems incongruent. Like, if they're nobodies, what are they saying that needs to be redacted?
Sure. Well, a lot. If you have to read the report to understand certain redactions. Some was to protect the witnesses who said, for example, the FBI actually interviewed some of the residences of Doric Towers, asking if they saw an Urban Moving Systems on September 10th or on any other day before that, which is true. According to two unnamed eyewitnesses, because their names are redacted, they actually saw an Urban Moving Systems truck at 8 a.m. on September 11th, and also on the day of September 10th when they had a client that they were moving, and I think was the client itself was like a painter or something like that. But also, too, some of the redactions are regarding the stuff that the Urban Moving Systems employees said to the neighbors of Doric Towers. In fact, one, which is partially redacted, one of the Urban Moving Systems employees actually told one of the residences of Doric Towers that he was actually a warehouse worker. He was a maintenance who worked at Doric Towers. He was a painter. So that they were giving these different employee statuses of who they actually were, why they were hiding the fact that they were moving companies or employees of Urban Moving Systems. You know, one can only speculate as to why. so I don't know why. The other reasons why there was certain redactions in that report was also to hide information gathered about the other moving companies. As to why this happened, I don't know. Maybe the broader spectrum was that the Israeli Mossad operation was a lot more extensive, as reported by later on by Carl Cameron of Channel 5, who did an expose in 2002. Another reason was maybe they wanted to hide the identities of these people in these other moving companies and the identities of other Mossad operatives, which later became more public in the Shea Memorandum, written by Gerald Shea, who is a lawyer based in, I think, Illinois, who wrote a huge memorandum, which he tried to give to the 9/11 Commission and the Joint House Inquiry, in which they both got the memorandum but didn't elaborate further on it. Incidentally enough, the urban moving systems story wasn't expanded upon by either the 9/11 Commission or the Joint House Inquiry. With the Joint House, I can understand because they were actually just investigating the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI, whereas the 9/11 Commission expanded a little bit further. Mm-hmm. So those are the reasons as to why some of those redactions were necessary and on the other spectrum, unnecessary. Maybe they were hiding the fact that this Mossad operation that was taking place on the East Coast was much more expansive, and they were hiding the identities of these people and what they were doing.
Okay, so, and you mentioned you think there's a connection that the moving companies had been actually moving the hijackers.
No, they were monitoring them. For example, when Marwan al-Shehi, Mohammed Atta, Abdul Aziz al-Amari were living in an apartment in a condo in Hollywood, Florida, just one block down, it was reported by Gerald Shea and other sources as well, that there was a Mossad agency, probably from Classic International Movers, that were living in an apartment just one block away, monitoring these people. So they were keeping close watch, even as far back as the year 2000, because that's when they first started coming into the United States, some of these people. So when they were moving around from New Jersey to Florida and to New York, these moving companies then can take over from these different moving companies in monitoring these people. Now, according to one questionable source, which is Wayne Madsen, who I would find to be on the fence in terms of credibility, so take what you will. According to Wayne Madsen, he thinks that the Israeli Mossad operatives in New Jersey were actually seen with Mohammed Atta Abdul Aziz al-Amari in New Jersey at a video store. But his sources only go back to his website. So take what you will from there. So with a very grain of salt. I don't like using questionable sources, but Wayne Madsen sometimes has decent information, which is very factual.
Sure,
so
sure.
Be careful with that. But as for moving them around, no, there's no actual evidence of that. There is evidence of Classic International Movers moving the family in Sarasota, Florida, who then escaped to Saudi Arabia, that co-chair of the Joint House Inquiry, Bob Graham, talks about to a website called Florida Bulldog, which is a very good website, not very known, but very good website because they detail the Saudi link to the 9/11 attacks. And Daniel Hopsicker, who's an independent journalist, actually refers to them as a reputable site as well. So for anybody listening, go to floridabulldog.com. It's actually a very good source for obscure 9/11 information that you won't hear at the legacy media.
So with regard to the moving company in Florida that's one block away, and there was investigative work done, just talk me through the chain there. This Sorry, say his name again. It's a lawyer or investigative journalist that.
It was an investigative journalist, Wayne Madsen.
No, sorry, not Madsen. The you mentioned someone doing an investigation of.
Gerald Shea.
Yeah. So he located a particular moving company, and then he found out where the employees were living, and then he related that to where because we know where the hijackers were, okay, but he related the staff of this moving company, who were Israeli nationals, were 1 block away.
Right. This was actually reported by also I believe it was CBS News as well in a website, but it was also like forgotten about in the next day or two, as in regards to a lot of the hidden anomalies of 9/11.
I'm just trying to get, is that in any way a speculative leap to say that those guys, can we actually tie in that they were involved with Mossad or something?
Well, it's actually reported on the Gerald Shea memo itself. The Gerald Shea memo actually goes into much detail. It's a big detail. Hardly anyone knows about the Gerald Shea memo. But if you look at, just type in Google Gerald Shea memo PDF, it'll come right up. And it was a very lengthy report done by him. And it showed the extensive nature, not just in Florida, too. It was like in the Southwest as well, Oklahoma, for example, Texas. Also, in regards to the art student ring that these people were using, selling paintings to the DEA and the FBI. It was almost like they were nebulous between the moving companies and the art student ring. But the Shea memo is the only memo that really goes into detail about the Mossad operative rings. There were 3, by the way. There were 3 rings. One was the ecstasy ring, which came out a little bit earlier and later, between 1996 to 2002. The art student ring, which was the biggest Mossad operative ring. It was about approximately 250 people involved with that. And they were infiltrating, they were selling cheap art to the homes. They went to the homes of drug enforcement agents, the FBI, even State Department officials. And of course, you had the moving companies, which were monitoring the hijackers between Florida, New Jersey, and New York. So you had 3 rings. Now, whether they were all simultaneously involved with the monitoring of the 9/11 hijackers, or the Hamburg cell, it'd be pretty much of a stretch to address the drug ring with the moving companies. But with the art student ring, I don't think they worked together or with each other. That's my opinion. I think there were separate rings, but they actually collected information separately. But that information was used jointly, if you can understand what I'm trying to get at, maybe.
Okay, now, how do you think this ties in with the American, 2 things, the American security establishment? Like, do you think elements within, say, the CIA know what's going on with these rings, and they're happy for that because these organizations, by this point, have strong links at some level? And also with the neoconservative political group that came in along with Bush, and documents like PNAC, the famous one, but also A Clean Break, okay, the Richard Pearl authored pro-Zionist document from a little bit earlier in the 90s. Do you think there's any link there, agenda-wise, as to what's with the allowing these Israeli groups to operate and covering up when they do operate within the United States then, and with maybe wanting certain outcomes with regard to 9/11 to be able to do things like go to war in Iraq and so on?
I think with the CIA, let's start there first. I think with the CIA that they may have known, certain agents anyway, I don't think many actually knew, about the transfer of monitoring the Hamburg cell, for example. Because the CIA is not allowed to legally operate inside the United States, that they may have allowed the Mossad itself to start monitoring the Hamburg cell as early as 2000, when Atta and Ziad Jarrah and Marwan al-Shehhi relocated to Florida, for example.
In the way the GID, the Saudi intelligence, seemed to be doing it on the West Coast. They used the Mossad.
That's correct. I think what happened was that if we go back, we covered this in our series. I'll use the example of what I think has actually happened here. The CIA was monitoring the Hamburg cell in Germany. They were also monitoring them in Afghanistan as well. But because they're not allowed to monitor them inside the United States, because it's unlawful that the CIA to legally conduct operations inside the United States, that they may have transferred the monitoring to the Mossad. For example, when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the Wafa Hazmi left that important meeting in Malaysia, according to Richard Blee says that when Khalid al-Minar and the Wafa Hazmi left for the United States, after they leave the meeting in Malaysia, they went to Saudi Arabia, then they left for the United States. Richard Blee goes back to a principals meeting and says, we have lost contact with Khalid al-Minar and the Wafa Hazmi. The NSA never says that. Actually, the NSA actually always monitors them both as far back as 99. So they don't lose contact, but they don't tell Richard Blee this. But isn't it quite convenient that Blee loses the contacts of these two guys, who then go to California, and immediately upon arrival there, they meet Saudi national Omar al-Bayoumi, who gets them housing and sets them up with a car. So that's what I think is happening here, is that the CIA...
Yeah, I think that when we looked at that, we decided it was very unlikely the CIA lost contact with these people. Right. Sorry, I interrupted your flow there, but that's... and again, there's like really good reasons to think that they were monitoring the Hamburg cell in Hamburg, right? And so you do see a pattern there. Then the hijackers arrive in the United States and they're picked up by Saudi and then Israeli intelligence officers.
Yeah, that's right.
Agents. Yeah.
With Ziad Jarrah in our previous podcast, with Ziad Jarrah, he was actually even monitored by agencies in, I think it was Lebanon, or I think it was, what was that one country that I forgot off the top of my head, where they found his passport. On Ziad Jarrah's passport, he had an Al-Qaeda symbol.
Oh yeah, he was in the United Arab Emirates, wasn't he? Where they picked him?
That's correct. Yes.
So the Al-Qaeda symbol on the passport is something that I think it might have been the UAE, or they were marking passports in a way, weren't they? Yeah.
Yes, it was. And that even them, I mean, even the intelligence, the Mukhbarat and UAE intelligence, were following Jarrah. So you have a lot of these agencies in other countries monitoring these people as well. So if you're going to tell me that they weren't always monitoring people every second of the day, you're fooling yourself, because most of these people probably knew what these people were up to. We covered this as well in terms of what they were talking about on the phone at the Yemen hub, and plus the phones that they were using, which was monitored by the NSA as well. So these people, and of course too, these are all just speculative links. There's no hard evidence to say that the Mossad was always monitoring Ziad Jarrah. The CIA was always monitoring Jarrah. There's these files that haven't been released yet, documents that haven't been made public. But all you have to do is just add 2 and 2 together. I mean, these agencies were always following these hijackers as far back as 1996. Things that we covered in our series and on the podcast previously show this as well. I mean, we do have public information that shows that German intelligence has always been monitoring the Hamburg cell, even though that these intelligence rings sometimes don't often share information with one another, and that's the case with the CIA and the FBI. It's not always the case with coexisting countries such as Israel and the United States, because it could have a beneficial outlook for the future in regards to the bigger aspects, which would be the Pentagon, the State Department, and the war machine itself. on a political and a geopolitical basis.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that. Well, is there where else would you like to go with this? Is there more to say on the?
Well, I mean, in regards to, I think this is a big problem in regards to the 9/11 truth community with certain popular names, which I won't get into, that they just want to blame Israel for the 9/11 attacks. And I think this is a huge mistake. A lot of these people are saying that, for example, most people who don't believe in planes or they don't believe in hijackers, that the problem stems back to their point that they believe that Israel's or the CIA or the Saudis are involved. When you dismiss the notion of hijackers and planes, you eliminate the complicity / foreknowledge of those same agencies. Who are the Israelis following if there's no hijackers? Who was the CIA following if there's no hijackers? If there's no planes, who were the Israelis celebrating on Doric Towers? So I think that there needs to be a careful analysis. Was Israel intelligence involved? Absolutely. They at least have foreknowledge. Complicity, it's going to be a tough sell. But with the Ziad Jarrah, which I covered in our previous podcast, that could be the case. And that could be even a more bigger case in regards to Israel being involved with the 9/11 attacks at some level. But one has to be very careful and very thorough in their studies in regards to the 9/11 attacks and not allow their preconceived worldviews to intervene and lead them into speculation, which would be damaging to the overall point in showing complicity for the attacks.
Okay, thanks for that, Adam. I think maybe in the future we'll talk more about the background story of Israel and Zionism and its wider geopolitical strategy, okay, and what that brings to the table in understanding how the pieces move. But thanks for now, and we'll pick that up again.
Thank you very much, Richard.